Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy Thursday. We are soldiering through the week. I need a shave, but I'm working so hard for you and trying to put out a good product for you that I don't care about shaving. I don't care about looking good. I just want to be here talking to you, entertaining you. Fantastic, awesome show planned for you today. I need you to right now start slamming that like button, hitting the subscribe, tell your friends. If you're listening over Apple, give me that 5-star review. Leave a comment, leave a question. We're going to eventually start answering your questions if you leave a question over Apple. Did TJ just yawn? Did he just yawn? Did I just hear someone yawn?
I wasn't on screen.
We can hear you, though. TJ Moe in studio with us. Thank you for joining us again from St. Louis. Fantastic show. Kathy Barnett, a surrogate, and I think she runs Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign. She's going to be here at the end of the show to talk about last night's debate. Joel Klatt, the voice of college football for Fox Sports, the smartest person talking about college football in all the land. He's going to join us. We're going to talk about Reggie Bush. Steve Kim's going to be here at the top of the show to help me talk about where we're going to start today's show. You start pounding the likes, you start giving me the 5-star review, you leave a comment on the YouTube page, or please leave a comment on the Apple page with a question. Let's help us fight the algorithm. And I'll do my part and entertain you by telling you things no one else will. That's what this show is all about. We are fearless here. And so I did not begin today thinking this is where I was going to go. But the more I thought about it, the more I sat with this topic, the more this is important, what I'm about to talk about. And it'll sound unimportant, but it's very important. Ryan Clark, the ESPN broadcaster, the former Pittsburgh Steelers safety, has found himself in a bit of a standoff, back and forth bickering with Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. Ryan Clark cracked an innocent joke about Tua. Tua responded, and now Ryan Clark has responded in a way that gets at a much larger conversation and discussion that we're going to have here today with Steve Kim, with TJ Moe, and me, with you guys. So I want to give you some context and some background before I start unpacking all of my thoughts. I want to play you the clip of what Ryan Clark said, the original video of what Ryan Clark said that sparked this beef between Ryan and Tua. Here's the clip.
I'm gonna tell you what he wasn't doing. He wasn't in the gym. I bet you that.
Come on,
he wasn't with me. He might have spent a lot of time at the tattoo parlor. He was not at the dinner table eating what the nutritionist had advised.
Oh my God.
He looks happy.
Okay.
He is thick.
He's thick.
Yeah, he's built like girls work at Onyx in Atlanta right now on the bottom.
Come on now.
Get to the show.
Am I allowed to ask you?
So he's cracked a joke, and to some degree, he's pushed the envelope by saying he's built like a woman. That's pushed the envelope, but it's a joke. It's the kind of thing that gets said in the locker room. Ryan Clark grew up in a locker room environment, grew up in an NFL environment. That kind of conversation and what he and Marcus Spears were laughing about, that's commonplace in football locker rooms. It's, to be honest with you, it's the kind of comments, it's why you hire a former NFL player, to have that kind of levity. It's the kind of joke Charles Barkley would make all of the time. Not a big deal, in my opinion. But Tua didn't like it and had this response.
I mean, I think we all worked hard throughout the offseason. And I'm not someone to talk about myself the entire time, but I mean, it takes a lot. You think I wanted to build all this muscle? Like, nah, to some extent, like I wanted to, I wanted to be a little lighter. There's I know there's a mixture of things that people don't understand, that people don't know about, that are talked about, that go behind the scenes. So, you know, I'd appreciate if you kept my name out your mouth. That's what I'd say.
All right, so at this point, everything's fine to me. Ryan Clark's cracked a humorous joke on NFL Live. Dan Orlovsky and Marcus Spears and whoever the host was, they enjoyed it, and that was that. The viewers were entertained. Ryan Clark got a little saucy. And Tua responded, defended himself. Basically, didn't go all the way there, but basically is saying like, hey, man, they calling me injury prone. I put on 10 pounds of muscle so I can deal with this violent game that I'm playing and hopefully won't get injured and, you know, keep my name out your mouth. That should have been the end of the story. That's normal. That's what should go on. But then this morning, Ryan Clark triggered me and helped me understand, like, this is why this country is lost. You can see it all just from following sports, following football, following the media. We have so dumbed down this society, and we have so elevated people who are stupid, who have no training, haven't been developed, haven't been mentored, haven't been taught anything, in positions of power, that they get a little bit of resistance, and not only do they fold, they then let you know that they're know-nothings. They then let you know how unqualified they are for their positions. And this is across the board. You're going to think I'm just talking about sports, but this is across the board. People are voting, people are in political offices, people are in power that don't even understand the position that they're in. Again, we see people on TV all the time talking about different historical matters, different customs and traditions. They're completely uninformed. Everything they know, they picked up from Twitter. They've never read a book. They've never done independent research and looked into things. Michael Orr says that, that he was in a conservatorship and he didn't know it until 2023. No one thinks well, hold on, let's go check. Let's do a Carfax on this. This guy's written a book in 2011 where he says he knew he was in a conservatorship, but that doesn't even cross people's mind. They saw it on Twitter, they heard about it, they can pick sides by race, and boom. No journalism needed, no fact-checking needed, no nothing, no context, no nothing, no perspective needed. I got a hot take, so-and-so's racist, the Tui family's racist. I don't have to check anything out. Doesn't matter about facts. This is how we got here. So Ryan Clark this morning issued an apology for his harmless joke. He did it in video. He did it with a written statement over Twitter. Let's play the video first.
Yesterday, Tua Tagovailoa had to answer questions about something I said on Monday, something that I truly just felt like was a joke to me. That I've realized as the week has gone on, if this man has to answer questions about it, if so many Miami Dolphins fans are offended by it, then people ain't taking it as a joke. So let me be very clear. If I've offended you, Tua, if I've hurt you, if I've disrespected you, if anybody that supports and loves you feels some sort of way because of what I said, I truly apologize. I had two priorities when I started this job. Number one, respect the players and the executives and the coaches that make this game run. Number two, it was earn the respect of those very same people, and more importantly, keep it. Anything contrary to that, then I gotta check myself. Now, don't get me wrong, my ego was involved. When Tua was asked about how he felt about these comments and he said, keep my name out your mouth, yeah, my first thought is, or what? Or he says he's scrappy, I think to myself, man, I fed my family on violence. I ain't tripping on that. But that's the pride that doesn't enable me to see what this dude's going through. The constant criticisms, the constant scrutiny, constantly being questioned, feeling the stress of always having to prove yourself. just to show people you can be available. And then you work throughout the entire offseason, which I talked to his trainer and said that man was in there 3 times a day to build himself up to be healthy. And you got to hear a comment like this. So I get it. I get it because I do want to respect Tua Tagovailoa. I get it because I want his respect too. So to the Miami Dolphins, to head coach Mike McDaniel, who I have a ton of respect for, but most of all, to Tua Tagovailoa and his family, I deeply apologize. I've reached out. I hope to talk to you soon, brother. But just know, I wasn't questioning the way you work. I wasn't questioning how much it mattered to you. It was what I can consider now a bad joke. But for me, it's been a lesson. I'll be better. Thank you.
They need to put a pride flag behind Ryan Clark moving forward. And all of ESPN needs to be just covered in the rainbow and the pride flag. This is gay. That's the only thing I can say. It's gay. We've been so feminized. How do we go from Charles Barkley being the gold standard of athletes turned broadcasters to this? You know who just won the Sports Emmy for the best broadcaster or studio analyst? Ryan Clark. He is the antithesis of what Charles Barkley was, who used to win that award regularly and who had been the gold standard. And we've seen Charles start to back off as well. And so this is where this entire society and culture has gone. Gay, soft, feminine, emasculated. But not just that, worse than any of all that, because Ryan Clark can be all those things. He can go on air and cry again, and he can talk about, I fed my family with violence. Or do what? You know, all this tough talk. You done took the pride flag. You done swallowed the hook, line, and sinker. All that tough guy, football player, that's all dead and gone. You cracked a joke on a man and then felt like you had to go on TV and apologize because you knew you did it for clout. You don't even believe it. You just did it for clout because you know that's what's in style. And oh, look at how humble Ryan Clark is. Look at how respectful he is. Look at how clueless he is. And it's not just Ryan Clark. And it's going to sound like I'm just going after Ryan Clark, but I'm going to broaden it out because it's the executives at ESPN and it's his peers in the media. This man just said, when I decided to do, and this is in a tweet, he also said it, when I decided to do TV, I had 2 main priorities. Number 1, I respect all NFL players, coaches, executives, and staff members. Number 2, earn and keep the respect of those very same people. Vivek Ramaswamy, the presidential candidate, has stated that everybody should have to take a civics test, basically, before they're allowed to vote. They need to know what country they're in, they need to know some basic civics about this country and history about this country. The same test that everybody has to take to become a natural citizen when you immigrate here, is that you should be able to pass before you can vote. Before you take a job at ESPN, they should make you know what their motto is, what their mission statement is. I believe the motto and the mission is to serve sports fans anytime, anywhere. That's the job. ESPN has abandoned the job. They've allowed all these spoiled, pampered athletes who never studied anything in school, just played football. They don't know what they're doing. They've allowed them to overtake ESPN. And so now the job is, when I decided to do TV, I had 2 main priorities: respect all the NFL players, coaches, executives, and staff members, and earn and keep the respect of those very same people? Are you kidding me? He didn't say, I wanted to inform fans. I want to entertain fans. I want to serve fans. That's allegedly ESPN's motto and mission statement. As a journalist, and an educated journalist, I can remember in 1990 when I graduated from college, I told everybody and I told myself that at no point, I did a calculation on, okay, I want to be a sports columnist, I want to be a sports writer, and I was very frustrated as a kid reading the Indianapolis Star and the way they covered the Indiana Pacers and the sports teams locally. And I said to myself, I will always remember to serve the readers, to serve sports fans, because at the time, I thought about the Indianapolis, I wasn't working for the Indianapolis Star, but I thought about the Indianapolis Star, and they had a daily circulation at that time, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 daily, maybe close to 1 million on Sundays. I can't remember. But I remember saying, there's 400,000 readers of the Indianapolis Star, and there's 15 guys on the Indiana Pacers. What's the better business decision? Try to please those 400,000 readers, or try to please 15 people on the Pacers staff? That's journalism. Serve the audience, serve the readers. This man's just put out a written statement and a verbal statement saying, I'm going to serve elite athletes, coaches, executives, staff members, and ownership. I'm going to serve the powerful. Screw the fans. That's what he just said. That's what ESPN is about. The fans don't matter. That's what this whole country has turned into. This is what politicians do on a daily basis. They don't care about the voters. They don't care about their constituents. They're going to serve the powerful and the elite, the people they hang out with, the people they consider their friends. Ryan Clark's mindset is no different than any other global elite person's mindset, any of these politicians we can't stand, any of these people that sell U.S. citizens out on a daily basis. He has that mindset. This is why I can't stand elites. But what's even worse, you go to Ryan Clark's Twitter page and go to this tweet, and I'm looking at people co-sign this. Journalists. Steve Weiss from the NFL Network. I like Steve Weiss, or I used to. And I'm sure he doesn't like me because, again, I'm different and think completely different than everybody else. And I actually think the audience and sports fans matter. Steve Weiss tweeted, right on, bro. This is important and reminds those of us in this business that we must be better. Thanks, RC, for raising the bar again. This Steve Weiss, I think, went to journalism school at Howard, allegedly. There's a kid that I hired at the Undefeated that has, I'm not going to call him out because I hired him. He's young. He doesn't know, but he chimes in too. Cut it out, people. Y'all don't. Sam Monson. I think he's from Pro Football Focus. He follows me over Twitter. Fair play, Ryan. Good for you. Jason Romano. Let's see. Yeah, he works for at Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith. I kind of like Jason Romano. I was a former ESPN producer from 2000 to 2017. Well said, Ryan. Matt Miller. I believe Matt is a former Kansas State quarterback, I believe. He's now an ESPN draft analyst and insider. You're a rare person, RC. Tons of respect for you. Ross Tucker. I like Ross Tucker. Former NFL player, smart guy. I think he went to an Ivy League school. Smart guy, whatever. Well done, Ryan. I mean, it just goes on. Cameron Wolf, I believe, is a former NFL player. Or no. National NFL reporter, NFL Network. Props on this, RC. Shows the little dude at the Yankees game with the respect hat. It just goes on and on and on with people, blue checks and other people connected to the sports world, congratulating Ryan Clark. Do they even know the job? I can't believe it. I can't, but it explains everything. We have this all across the board in America. We have teachers in grade school that don't know their job. Oh, teaching 2 + 2 is 4, that's beneath me. Let me talk to your kids about my sexuality and theirs. That's the job of a teacher, to groom. We've created a level of ignorance, and I'm always blaming social media, but social media is a part of the blame here. It's just miseducated everybody on what our job is, what our role is, what's proper, being a groupie for athletes is the job of other athletes who get jobs on TV. Now, we sat and watched for 20 years Charles Barkley say whatever he wants and criticize whatever athlete he wants, and that used to be celebrated. And now we've gone the complete other direction, and this dude's offering up sincere apologies to an NFL player over a fat joke. Is Tua really that? Tua's skin isn't that thick. He just thin. He called Ryan Clark out, and Ryan Clark folded because he wants to be in with the sensitive group, and he wants to show everybody how humble he is and how accountable he is. A simp and an idiot. And they're all getting rewarded. The simps and the idiots are all getting rewarded. He's allegedly the gold standard of studio analysts right now. Ryan Clark. He won the Sports Emmy. May win another one for this. Incredible. Incredible. Before we're going to get to Steve Kim, but I want to just take care of one of our sponsors who I love right now. This Nugenix stuff is really helping me out, guys. My workouts have been incredible. My energy has been incredible. I hope you guys can see it on this show. And it's because I'm taking my Nugenix every day. I'm working on my testosterone levels. You guys can get our sponsor, Nugenix Total T, is offering a complimentary bottle when you text 231231 and enter the keyword fearless. You don't have to lose your shape. You don't have to lose your energy. You don't have to lose your You don't have to lose your man hormone, bottom line. I was about to say something else and I caught myself. You don't got to lose it. You can keep it. Nugenix can help you keep it. If you want to stay in shape, it's been part of my weight loss journey. I've been taking Nugenix. It's been helping me out. I got far more energy. My workouts are going 10 times better. Everything's going 10 times better. All you got to do is text 231231. Men are losing their testosterone. It's happening across the board. You don't have to surrender. You don't have to give up. They want you to give up. I just read a study somewhere. It's like lowest testosterone level in American history is going on right now. It's not, I think it's 37% lower than it has been. You don't have to put up with it. Whatever they're putting in your food, whatever they're doing to us, you don't have to put up with it. Get yourself some Nugenix. It's helping me. It can help you. You can text 231231, enter the keyword fearless. Text 231231, keyword fearless. Texting enrolls you into reoccurring automated text messages. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply. The #1 doctor recommended brand by primary care physicians based on an independent survey conducted by the IQVIA 2022. Now, I'm ready for my boy Steve Kim to join me and TJ Moe in this discussion. Steve, your thoughts on Ryan Clark's apology?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to everybody. I was, first of all, taken aback by Tua's reaction, being Polynesian. That culture is a little bit different. And Tua, by all accounts, is a fine young man. Very well raised, incredibly well mannered. He's the type of guy that if your daughter brought home, you'd be like, you know what? We're good with the Southpaw. But look, everyone has bad days. Everyone has feelings. Now, as it relates to Ryan Clark, if this was truly sincere, right, the way he felt, Jason and TJ, I just would have called Tua privately and say, look, no hard feelings on my end. It was a joke. Let's just hash it out. Make it a private call. And then maybe you tweet like, hey, me and Tua have talked. We're good. We worked it out as men. But this whole thing that you pointed out just really looks to me like he's grandstanding and virtue signaling, and then it becomes about Ryan Clark. Like, think about it. He actually mentioned the fact that the social media and Dolphin fans were upset. Ryan, so what's it about? Is it about you and Tua, or the social media blowback and your social credit score as a announcer? That's where he loses me on the sincerity of it all. Is that if this was truly sincere, you would not care about what anyone thinks except for Tua, and then reach out to Tua. That's it. But to amplify this, and it all becomes, look at me, I'm so virtuous and I'm good. And here's the scary part that he's doing. I don't think Ryan Clark even realizes this. He is now forcing everyone else to lower their bar on their coverage. Because now every other journalist that has a critique of a player, that said player can say, keep your name out my mouth, and here we go. Because all of this has become access journalism. I see a lot in boxing where people are afraid to really say certain things about certain people. Certain boxers are off limits. Certain figures, you got to kind of handle them with kid gloves, or you never get credentials, or you never get the interviews for your YouTube channel. So all of this becomes a game. And it's really a shame that there's no more guys like a Michael Katz, who was an absolute ball buster of a boxing journalist. Guys like Wallace Matthews back in his prime. Mike Royko, I'm sure, never took any gruff from anybody. It's the death. It is the death of the newspaper, man, Jason, and journalism.
It's the death of male conversation. Mm-hmm. Again, this is standard locker room talk. It's harmless.
Oh, yeah.
And I know the whole woman thing that he put on it at the, a girl at Onyx or whatever, but that's standard locker room talk. I don't have a problem with Tua saying, hey, keep my name out your mouth. But it should have just ended there.
Did you see the beginning of that video, though? He went a little deeper into where he's like, look, I'm a Samoan. We have a culture. If we need to get scrappy, then we will. And sort of challenged him in
Yes.
So I thought that was a little over the top.
It's certainly over the top. He's basically saying, hey, I may not be rough, but my family plays rough. That's what he's basically saying, I'm telling you.
Wait until you see my dad.
No, he got some cousins. I mean, he got some cousins and probably some brothers and stuff like that, But anyway.
But you're going to fight somebody over saying you look a little out of shape? That's what it's.
Here's what I'll say, and I'm not. Tua doesn't come from traditional black culture because he's not black. But Samoans, they got a little of this too. This whole respect thing and disrespect being a trigger. This is like, you stepped on my Air Jordans. And you didn't apologize quick enough, and I feel disrespected. And so without that level of respect, a lack of respect is a justification for taking it up a level and potentially getting violent. It's silly, it's stupid, but having been a journalist I can't name all the athletes that threatened to beat me up, kill. Tried to. If Wayne Simmons, I could have been killed by Wayne Simmons because that was a violent man. And he tried to get at me in a nightclub, but it was a nightclub where it was totally bent my direction. The owner and everybody there, I was their guy. And so when the guy, he jumped over a table and a bouncer jumped and met him in midair. But anyway, I don't mind athletes drawing a line in the sand and say, hey, man, this could get physical. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Well,
I just never apologized.
Got that. I hear what you're saying here. One thing, this is a little bit off track, so I'll keep it short, but I don't want my quarterback to be triggered that easily.
That's
That's my real take.
Thin-skinned, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I will say this about Ryan Clark, though, and this is the point you made earlier, to some degree. Even Ryan, you could tell, felt, I can't deliver this without showing them I do have masculine instincts. Because the first thing he did was say, I'll tell you the truth. Or what? What are you going to do? Right? And then the second thing I told him, I'm not afraid of violence, bring it. So he had to show you he was a man. He's still, all men deep down have this masculine reaction, and when you abandon that, you still feel kind of emasculated. So you tell everybody, here's what I really think, but let me show you the proper way. Here's how we should do it as men.
And what he should have done is just ignored it or laughed it off. I mean, Steve, honest to goodness, how does Ryan Clark, according to the Emmy Awards, he's now right there with Charles Barkley. He's the best studio analyst in sports TV. I've never understood it. He's illogical. He plays the race card over stupid things. He cried on air over nothing. And now we've got this. This guy's actually one of the worst, and he's the antithesis of what Charles Barkley was in Barkley's heyday.
Well, I think number one, there may be a Barkley backlash or a fatigue. Also, Ryan Clark, given his political and cultural stances, checks a lot of boxes. So that becomes a politically correct decision to make. You know, you go back to journalism and being very combative through your honesty. One of my great friends and an absolute legend here in the Los Angeles area, Doug Krikorian, who worked for years with the LA Times, Herald Examiner, Long Beach Press Telegram. One of his famous stories was that he was kind of ribbing or was very, very critical of an all-pro linebacker by the name of Isaiah Robertson. Jason, this is a true story.
One of my favorite players.
Yeah, he chased Doug Krikorian all over the practice field one day. And I asked Doug, I said, Doug, did he catch you? And he said no. And I said, well, maybe your critiques were pretty good, because if he couldn't catch you, maybe he wasn't doing a great job on the football field. And he used to, I remember as a kid in the late 80s, every day what I would do is I'd go to the Johnson's Market, which was across the street on Whittier Boulevard from Montebello High School. So this is, again, I'm going to date myself. I'd have 3 quarters. 1 quarter for LA Times, 1 quarter for the LA Daily News, 1 quarter for the Herald Examiner. And in the late 80s, it was interesting that Doug, he did not think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was very good anymore. And he did not treat him like a sacred cow, and he would get after him. And now I look back at it and I go, wow, I didn't know how good I had it. I really didn't know how good I had it. And Jason and TJ, about a month and a half ago, me and Mario on the 3 knockdown rule had Tim Bradley, who's now a Hall of Fame boxer, one of my favorite people, and on ESPN. And I truly believe he has developed as a announcer and a broadcast personality, because he actually says stuff that makes me go, ooh, that's not going to play well, and I love it. And at the end of the interview, I asked him, Tim, let me ask you this. As someone that was once covered by the boxing media, and now you are media, do you now understand the job that we did and when you'd get pissed off at me? Because there was a period of time me and Tim did not talk. Okay, we actually had a bit of a falling out for a year or two, and now we're great. And he says, I do, because now when he gets into fighter meetings, these young fighters, they listen to what he says, and if it's any type of critique, they start to battle him. And he says, Steve, I get it, but I'm going to tell these fighters, and I give Tim credit. I don't care what you think. I'm going to do my job. Unfortunately, guys like him are very, very rare in today's landscape.
So, brought it out from an individual analysis to like, hold on, ESPN at some point used to care a little bit about journalism. And they had this motto and mission statement to serve sports fans anytime, anywhere. Why isn't there some executive, some leadership, or again, I think the answer is obvious, is because ESPN has run away from journalism. They know what Ryan Clark represents. They know what his statement represents. And this is the way they want everybody on TV, on their network, to behave. The fans don't matter. You're there to kiss the players and ownership and coaches. You're there to kiss their tail end.
This is the Disney-ification of ESPN, and it seeps down to every level. It really does, or the corporate ladder. So by the time you get to the Ryan Clark level, you cannot be combative. You have to be kind of a bleeding heart, if you will. You have to always take the player side. When they take a knee over some of the worst stances or illogical thought process, you have to support them. When they walk out of a practice like they did a couple years ago, various teams, you have to stand in solidarity with that. Even if you feel completely different, it will not play well. Trust me, I know this firsthand as someone who basically said when the Milwaukee Bucks walked out of the NBA bubble, I said to Chris Mannix on a tweet, they're going to make no difference. They were going to make, and I was literally told within a minute, you better take that down. And so I kind of know the atmosphere that goes there. But going back to Ryan Clark real fast about that tweet, I found that interesting that he said, my job is to go out there and respect everyone and earn the respect of everyone, players, coaches, staff. Okay, well, if you truly were living up to that code and you truly believed it, well then, Ryan, you would have never said what you said on national TV. See the hypocrisy of that? See, he did not live up to that creed because he really doesn't believe that creed. It's something that's very convenient to say as a mea culpa, a retroactive mea culpa, because if you really wanted the respect of people like Tua, he would have never uttered that phrase to begin with, because now you are questioning a guy's work ethic and commitment. So that whole thing is fraudulent to me.
I don't, and I say this in all seriousness, I don't think Ryan Clark has a mature understanding of what the word respect means, because he's misusing the word respect. What he wants to be liked. That's what his statement should say. My two main priorities coming in here is I want to be liked by coaches, players, and executives, and I want them to like me. And I know I'm old, and I know I'm yelling, get off my lawn, but I never wanted, it's not that I wanted to be disliked, but I never cared whether people like me or not. Carl Peterson and Marty Schottenheimer and Derek Thomas, and me and him were friends. I would criticize him because, again, at the end of the day, I had a job to do, and I wanted to be, to be honest with you, you know what? I wanted to be respected by the audience. These athletes, dime a dozen, they don't subscribe to the newspaper. They don't buy advertising in the newspaper. They weren't my bosses, and they weren't in talk radio in Kansas City. I didn't care. And so I don't understand how these other journalists and a journalistic institution, used to be one, ESPN, has everybody just forgotten that, or do they honestly think caping up for these multimillionaire athletes is some kind of courageous stance? Because a lot of the caping up they're doing for the athletes is these people on TV, Ryan Clark and some of the trained journalists, they hate the actual audience. They hate sports fans. That's why I'm saying this is bigger than just sports. It's the same phenomenon we have going on with MAGA people. Republican Party hates MAGA people. They hate their own base, their own constituents. And MAGA people are just supposed to tolerate it. Sports people are just supposed to tolerate the fact that ESPN, that says they're there to serve sports fans, and that the athletes talking about actually hate them. That's how we got to this point where Russell Westbrook is declaring war on any sports fan that looks at him the wrong way. Yeah. Oh, you call me Westbrook, I got a right to fight you, and the whole media is justifying it. The athletes, the media, all hate sports fans. Are people ever going to snap out of it and be like, man, this is BS, F y'all?
I got a question for you. Today, let's put you on the beat of doesn't matter, don't care, Dallas Cowboys. The Rachel Nichols of the world and these other reporters have convinced themselves that they need access, so they can't report the bad stuff, and the best way to serve their audience is to have that access. You, when you were in Kansas City, had all the access and never bent to the nonsense. Could you still get that today, or has everybody changed?
The system has changed in terms of I had the power of the newspaper and the power of how powerful my voice was. And so not only did I create access for myself, I created, and these guys would never admit it, but they would have to, and I created access for everybody else. The fear of me made people go cry on other people's shoulders and build relationships with other people. And then if given an opportunity, because their agents, take Larry Johnson, who I'm friends with now. But Larry didn't like me when he was a player, but his agent did. And talk Larry into dealing with me, because Larry was like, oh man, we're in a contract dispute. We better buddy up to Whitlock, because he's the only guy that will take on Carl Peterson, who was the general manager and the Chiefs organization, and argue our side. Tony gets all these players. They get in a contract dispute. I became their best friend. And them or their agents would funnel me information. But the dynamics have changed. And this is where the fall of newspaper has hurt journalism, is there aren't T.J. Simerses walking around. And I know Steve remembers T.J. Simers at the L.A. Times. We were the hammers. We were the hammers that created access for everybody else and kept people honest. They destroyed newspapers. ESPN turns it into an access butt-kissing game. And basically, Adrian Wojnarowski or Adam Schefter, I'm not taking a shot at these guys, but information became their greatest resource, and buddying up with agents and executives and making sure they got fed information became more important than actually breaking news. They don't break news anymore. They just report what they're told. And so I've taken I couldn't do it now. I'm just telling you, because newspapers aren't powerful enough. You don't have the local hammer that again, I'm telling you, I would create access for the national guys, because there would be so much fear of me and my ability to control a narrative in Kansas City that you'd start in order to get my narrative out, let me talk to the national guy, or let me talk to the guy at the other newspaper, or let me talk to the beat writer. That system, the columnists are all weak and the newspapers don't matter as much. So, I mean, it's incredible now. I talk all the time about, with a buddy of mine, Dennis Evans, that works in Kansas City now on TV, just how much things have changed in terms of how much control the teams have. They tell you when you can talk to a player, and they control it all the way around. There's the days of me and Derek Thomas meeting at a bar or meeting at his house and all that's out the way. That will never happen. Derek, and Neil Smith drove down to Louisiana to eat at Neil Smith's mama's house. Just not out of any kind of journalistic thing, just because we wanted. Them days are over. That just doesn't happen. So, Steve, you can jump back in here if you have some additional.
I remember this had to be about almost 20 years ago. T.J. Simers, at the top of his game, at his prickly best, they gave him like a Sunday night segment on Fox Sports West. It was called like the hot seat. So various athletes would come on to get grilled by T.J. Simers. I think after about a month or so, they said, okay, no one would do it. Because think about, no one wanted to go to the electric chair. Imagine that, right? Without the they said, okay, this ain't good. We can't get guys to sign up. The other thing that's really interesting, you talk about content providers or content creators. You make a good point, Jason. The teams themselves all have YouTube channels. They all create their own vignettes. They all create their own highlight films, packages, get to know this. They look back. Ryan Clark, doesn't he have the Pivot podcast? So he himself has to play this game individually away from ESPN, because if him and Channing Crowder and I believe Fred Taylor, let's say Tua stays upright this year. Let's say they win the Super Bowl. Let's say Tua wins the Super Bowl, 5,000 yards. He only gets one concussion instead of 5, but he throws 50 touchdowns. They win a Super Bowl. Now you want Tua on the podcast. Here's the problem. If you don't do the mea culpa, Tua's going to say, no, we're going to get scrappy, but I'm not talking to you. So now that becomes You have to keep that access. You have to keep that pathway. That's really interesting. And one last thing I want to say.
Hold for 1 second, because you made a great point. Because it's not just Tua. Tyreek Hill. It's like he's Tua's number one receiver. Yes. Does Tyreek Hill go on the Pivot podcast? Jalen Waddle, will he go on the Pivot podcast? Mike McDaniel, the head coach, you've just had a little beef with Tua. Would he go on the Pivot podcast? And so when you're like these guys, Ryan Clark, a lot of these guys that have been given these massive platforms, all of them, Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes, they're not broadcasters. They're not interesting. What they have to offer is, hey, athlete, come on over here. We'll do a little circle jerk together, and we'll make you look good. We'll do a show, and that's that. No one gets challenged. No hard questions get asked. We treat you like a god. And so they have to make sure that they keep those lines of communications and those relationships great, because they don't have anything provocative, profound to say, interesting. They don't have anything, they just don't. And so when you have a really talented columnist, a TJ Simers, a Dan Lebitard in his heyday, a Bill Simmons in his heyday, access is less important for us. You won't talk to me? Well, I got interesting things I can say about you without ever having talked to you. Mm-hmm. Most beat writers, most of these athletes are idiots. They haven't given much thought to the world. All they can do is repeat Twitter talking points, and that's just not that interesting. I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, one last thing I want to add is, could you imagine if Albert Hainsworth, who was one of the biggest free agent busts of all time, he basically signed for his money with Washington, and he stopped really caring about the game of football. And you talk to a lot of his teammates. I've read a lot of stuff where they said they just could not trust this guy. They could not stand this guy. He could not be counted on. But nowadays, the coverage would be, instead of ripping Albert Hainsworth just for his play, just say what's on tape on the All-22, then you can bring up, well, he's more than an athlete. And then they can dredge up something that happened in his childhood, like he lost his dog at age 8. He didn't get the Red Rifle BB gun for his 12th birthday, and it's now you would not even be able or have that ability to say to Albert Hainsworth, why are you playing like the worst 3-tech in the league after you signed for this big money? So these are complete shackles now on a lot of writers or journalists that actually want to do their jobs.
I wonder if there is a little bit of blame to place on the fans here and what they want. Because they're like what you just described about the former athletes and their podcasts and all that. You have pointed out, Club Shay Shay's pretty good. Like, people get on there. Nobody considers Shannon Sharpe to be a journalist. That's one thing. But it's a good podcast. They get on and they tell stories. And I now see the fans. No, this is a similar point that I made last time I was sitting in this chair. I don't like when fans sit there and scream at their front office to give somebody an extra $14 million. Like, the fans jump on the player's side, not the journalist's side most of the time. And so are the fans clamoring for the story time with Shannon Sharpe instead of a real journalist, somebody who's actually going to speak truth to power?
The fans are like me, particularly this newer version of fans. They're like me when I used to eat at Applebee's. And I was like, man, this is a good steak. And then I went to Ruth Chris, and I was like, man, that Applebee's, that steak is garbage. I'll go back for a salad, but I'll never eat steak there again. They don't know what they're missing. They don't know what they don't know. They're older fans. There's people in Kansas City watching today. Someone from Kansas City emailed me today and tell me, like, oh God, Whitlock used to do this Chiefs report card at the end of the year. I would grade every Chiefs player. It would take up 2-3 pages in the newspaper, and hilarious comments, serious comments. Everybody would get a grade A to F with all these comments. And so the older people are like, oh man, I miss that. There's this younger group of fans in Kansas City that have never had it. They've never seen actual journalism. They've never seen actual humorous, insightful journalism. So they don't miss it, and they just think, access and get an athlete to come on and just tell a funny story, that's good enough. That's filling for them.
But they'll actually criticize the real journalists. That's what I'm saying. It's not just that they don't know what good journalism is.
That's idolatry. That's idolatry, and how materialistic and how much we worship money, and how we think that anybody that has a lot of money is the winner, and it doesn't matter how they got the money. If Kim Kardashian has to suck everything from here to the Mississippi River to get that money, well, she got the money. She's great. She's worthy of being an idol. Jay-Z, sell dope, rap about nothing, garbage, but he's got the money. He's great. That's all. And so these athletes, that's what they report about the athletes and how much money they make. That's all part of the sales job, because they've made our culture so materialistic, so devoid of substance, that we judge winners and losers solely off a bank account.
There is one, I'm taking us off the rails here, this is a very Royce thing to do, but there's a reason in our political system why we're not an actual democracy, because we collectively don't know enough to tell you exactly what's best for us. This is why we send representatives. They should be more educated. That's their full-time job. We give them enough for a living instead of just a side gig. And we say, go make decisions. You know our best interests. We'll vote you in, and you go make it, because I don't have time to do this all the time. That's how we should be operating with journalists. You live in this world full-time. Don't let me tell you the best story to write. I mean, I can consume something. I like hearing stories on Club Shay Shay, but I think we give too much credit. This is coming from the debate last night, listening to Nikki Haley at over and over again say the American people know best. No, they don't.
You're right. And when you start thinking about what social media has done to journalism, turn it into clickbait, everybody's putting out content that they want clicked on. And so again, the easiest way, people, particularly for people with no talent, is just having access to someone popular saying something, anything that will draw clicks. Steve, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, TJ, based on what you said, I go through this in boxing all the time. And yeah, people that always side with the athletes and they live vicariously through them. I call them not managers, but fanagers. And they don't want the best fights. They just want the guys that they wave pom-poms for to make the most amount of money because they live vicariously through them. I find them to be of lower intelligence and don't have much going on. Because if you really had a real life, you wouldn't care what a certain fighter made. And then they always use the accusations of racism, or I love this one. Anytime someone tweets at me, y'all be hating. First of all, the y'all is bad enough. But the be hating is really the absolute final clue that you're just really not that smart. And I nicknamed these people the demographic, not the demographic, the demographic. And I got into trouble with that, but I love it. But at this point, now that I don't want access and I'm kind of, my time in boxing, I don't know if it's coming to a close, but it's different. I've now realized one thing, to be honest. I'm no longer here to just really cover boxing. I'm really now here just to troll and make fun of those people. And that's what really keeps my journalistic ethos sharp, taunting them. Because I'm being dead serious about it. Not exactly Jim Murray here. I'm gonna be me because it's funny. And so, you have to have that ability to be honest. But, Jason, on a more serious note, the minute you say, I'm going to give up access, I don't care, but I'm going to state my opinion, you actually become a sharper journalist. Because now you don't need them. You don't need the quotes. You don't need the access. You don't need to be around them. You just now have to have enough moral gumption to say, you know what, let's just tell the truth. Put it out there.
Thank you, Steve. Great job as always. You can email me and us at fearlessblaze@gmail.com. Conversation is going to get even better because Joel Klatt, the voice of college football for Fox Sports, is going to be here. We're going to talk about Reggie Bush and his defamation lawsuit against the NCAA. Next. What would you hope that people talk about you 50 years from now when they talk about John MacArthur? What do you want us to be saying?
I'd be honored if somebody said he was a friend of Jason Whitlock.
Man, you made my day at the start of this, and you just made my day again. I couldn't be more flattered, and all praise to God for just whatever it is I'm doing, because I'm a flawed person. All right, welcome back. Time for some Joel Klatt. Time to check in with the smartest man talking about college football and college sports in the sports media industry. Fox Sports' own. He's their college football voice. He's their NFL draft analyst. He's the host of the Joel Klatt Show podcast. He's a former quarterback at the University of Colorado. And again, as I said, he's the smartest person talking about college sports. And so there's no one better than Joel Klatt to talk about what I want to talk about today, Reggie Bush, his defamation lawsuit against the NCAA, and whether Reggie Bush deserves his Heisman Trophy back. Joel Klatt, welcome back to Fearless. Joel, before we get rolling, because I don't want to forget, because I can get so immersed in our conversation, tell everybody about your podcast, when it airs, where they can find it, because I'll get immersed in the conversation. I'll forget.
Yeah. Listen, well, first of all, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, you can find Joel Klatt Show anywhere you get your podcast. We've also got the show is on YouTube, so you can subscribe to the YouTube channel at Joel Klatt Show. And we drop episodes all year, well, really all season, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So be looking for that. And I can't wait to talk about this subject, though, because it's one that I actually haven't gotten into on my show. So you and I will get to hash it out for the first time here.
So let's start here very easy. And Joel, TJ Moe, former wide receiver at Mizzou, is here with me in studio. But let's start here. Does Reggie Bush deserve his Heisman Trophy back?
Oh man, I mean that's such a complicated answer. If I was to walk through it and try to give you the shortest one possible, I would say yes. And that has more to do with the ineptitude of the NCAA than it does what Reggie actually did or didn't do, or the people around him, or what USC did or didn't do, or the people around the program. The problem with the NCAA is its incredible inconsistency. And when you look at what has gone on in the landscape of college football, their inconsistency in terms of governance and punishment is staggering. And because of that, it's not a just penalty for Reggie to be singled out in this scenario. I do think he should get his Heisman back. And that's I'm slowly answering that, Jason, because that has been an evolving opinion of mine over time.
Yeah, and so I think most people are right there with you, as am I. I thought they should have never taken this Heisman Trophy from him, because you just can't. The toothpaste is out of the bottle. You can't put it back in. He won the Heisman. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows he was the best player that year. It was silly in the first place.
Well, and the Heisman is an on-field award, and these were off-field issues, right? So, like, the two aren't even the same, right? Okay.
So I think most people are right there with you. I certainly am. I think the defamation suit against the NCAA, I don't like it. I think it's pointless, and I think it speaks to a larger issue of where we have gone in sports, that everybody is just a brand. Everybody is just a individual business. And we think of that as that's a positive. I don't see it as a positive. And again, I obviously played mid-major college football, and that's always been less of a business than the elite Power 5 conference football. But my college experience was so rich and so meaningful and so impactful on my life in so many ways beyond business, just my development as a human being and as a man. And to see college sports reduced to just, and all the athletes, and this is in college and in pros, everybody is just a brand. And oh my God, the NCAA said, use the word pay for play in a statement. That damages my brand. I'm going to do a defamation lawsuit. I just think we're seeing all of the humanity ripped completely out of college sports and sports in general. And I just don't think that's good over the long haul.
Yeah, there's a lot there. You unpacked a lot, because there's some cultural things in there. There's some things that are cultural that then seep into the athletic space and experience. Let me start with this. Let's go back to, if I was to try to parse this out before we get into maybe the bigger conversation. You know, the NCAA is allowed to make statements and build narratives while holding those that are under, quote, investigation basically to a gag order. The same is going on currently with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. They can come out and say, this is about impermissible benefits. The vice president of the NCAA makes a statement about the Jim Harbaugh investigation that is ongoing. Jim will, by the way, serve a 3-game suspension that is self-imposed by Michigan, not NCAA imposed. And the NCAA makes a statement about impermissible benefits and impermissible coaching activities, and this is not a cheeseburger, and basically trying to build a public relations narrative while stating, hey, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, you better not say a word. So that doesn't make any sense, right? So if I'm, let's go back to Reggie. If I'm Reggie Bush or Jim Harbaugh or anybody in these investigations, you can make a strong case that there were narratives pushed and built that were maybe false, but certainly damaging, that you had no ability to contradict. And so because of that, there is some standing here, at least in my estimation. And certainly, and I know Reggie, and you know, Reggie is uniquely aware of his standing in college football as one of, if not the best players that has ever played and graced the field. And that is something that he has built and will continue to build a career off of, you know, outside of football and in terms of his brand. And so at this point, I think that he's looking out for his family, his career, and it's bigger than just my brand, you know, this or that. So that's what I would say for that. Now, let me dip into kind of the other side of that. In the current landscape with NIL, the way that we have gone in sports in general, we have turned team sports into individual sports. And many athletes, in particular the good ones, and in revenue sports more specifically, will view themselves more as individual sport athletes than team sport athletes. And that distinction is very important, because you can make the argument that, hey, listen, they're good and they would help the team win regardless, and so on and so forth. Yes, but the fundamental aspect of a team is that the individuals on that team become subservient to a common cause and to a goal that is bigger than themselves. And I believe that has become a very difficult achievement for coaches across the landscape, in particular in college football, because of the direction that we've gone. These brands for individuals that you talk about are starting to be built now in junior high on social media by agencies and parents, so that their kid, when recruited or if recruited, will have some sort of market value in the NIL space. Well, that's obviously not good for team sports, because team sports in and of themselves at their foundation is about putting yourself in a role on a team that you're trying to achieve a goal that's bigger than yourself.
So, Joe, I love where you just took this conversation. And so this next response, I want you to remove, I want to talk to Joel, the father, Joel, the believer. Seriously, because okay. I think where you just took me, Yeah, not the. You just took me to I'm thinking about Baby Gronk. Do you remember? Did you catch the Baby Gronk phenomenon this offseason?
Yes.
And it was just a month or two ago. And that's what you're talking about. Someone building a brand when it's a baby and they're already starting to build a brand. And just everything you're talking about, we can relate it to just sports, but it's all of American society and this culture that we have. Everybody's walking around with a phone, capturing every moment they have, trying to build a brand for themselves. And when I say everybody, I'm saying a lot of people. And when I think about our young people, and they all want to be influencers and TikTokers and YouTubers, and we have more young people wanting to do that than any other endeavor, any other profession. They compare that to China, and the kids there want to be astronauts. Our kids want to be influencers. I just think this is corrosive for our society and for young people and for your kids. As a father that's raising his kids very seriously, we're dumping them into a culture where everybody sees themselves as a commodity. I just can't believe that's healthy.
I completely agree with you. I cannot imagine a world in which my wife and I decide that it's okay for our kids to have social media before they're close to 18. I think social media is derisive. I think it's corrosive to the individual and to the soul. I'm a big believer that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So what you emphasize, you will achieve. If you emphasize fame and materialism, then you will achieve fame and materialism at the detriment of the rest of your entire, being. And being, at least in my estimation, is not about those things. So, I think you're spot on. From my seat, what I see out there are people selling themselves to achieve some goal that others have told them is the best goal to achieve. I don't sense that we have the same type of, certainly, nuclear family system that will emphasize the type of things in our culture that used to be emphasized in terms of what makes a man, what makes a woman, and I'm talking about a quality man and a quality woman. We no longer say like, hey, listen, I think, for instance, for years, we have basically put down those women who decide to stay at home and raise their families as if there's something less, and again, I'll just go back to, if you can set for yourself where your treasures are, then that's what your heart will go towards. That's where your heart will be. And that's what you will start to emphasize. If in our household, our main goal was for me to have more social media followers or my kids to be on social media, then that's what would happen at the detriment of us as a family. So I don't know if that's all that coherent, but I certainly believe, Jason, that it has something to do with where we emphasize the importance of our individual self.
I want to take you back to analyst Joel and former player Joel and connect this to coaching in terms of, because everybody's gotten so cynical about coaches and what their agendas are. I believe you played for Bill McCartney. And I would
Gary
have
Barnett,
to imagine.
actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gary Barnett. But I'm thinking about Bill McCartney at Colorado, and I'm sure it was true of Gary Barnett when he was at Colorado. Did those guys want to be successful, win championships, and make money? Absolutely. Did they spend time trying to disciple and develop the guys as men as well? I believe they did. Our coaches, and I didn't even get along that great with our head coach, but he wanted us to be better men. And that, to me, in this era, is being taken off the table. And everything with these kids, when they start recruiting them at 16, It's all just a business transaction, and you actually are incentivizing coaches or putting coaches in a position where they ignore any of the other development that coaches used to be into. We've taken that all off the table. It's just a business transaction with a teenager.
This is a great point that you're making. I would expand it. I think that every individual listening, it doesn't just relate to team sports. As a person, your interpersonal interactions with other people are one of two things: relational or transactional. And you have to look inside and realize, like, what are you expecting out of every interaction that you have across the day? And this then transcends into college football. Now, football, the way that I cut my teeth in the sport, and my dad was a high school football coach, right? So I saw it for so many years when I was growing up, that team first, building into young men, holding standards, holding them accountable, knowing that you're making young men better, and you're helping rear them in some cases. That went on at Colorado when I was there with Gary Barnett, who cut his teeth under Bill McCartney. And in a large sense, that has been taken away from coaches because of the transactional nature of the player's experience, right? When the player can then transfer every single year, and when the player is thinking more about his monetary value rather than the team's success, the coach has a much harder time getting them to buy into something bigger so that they can hold standards in order to better that person as an individual. So then the coach's incentive is only, I got to maintain my job of my, $7 and $8 million salary and my coach's jobs. And guess what? I don't know exactly which player is going to be here and which player is not. So the investment into the person, I believe, is starting to go down and be diminished in college football, while the investment into the athlete is still there. They'll invest into producing a great football player, but the harder aspect of that is investing into building a great person, because that's not going to pay dividends on a balance sheet or on a scoreboard. Now, you could argue that it might, because if you've got a team full of great individuals, maybe they care about each other and maybe they play better as a team unit. But having said that, the nature of the experience now with the transfer portal and the unlimited ability to move around with the NIL, it has largely disincentivize the coach from concerning themselves in those areas, because the payoff is just not there.
And so, is there any role, the problems we just discussed, is there any role the NCAA can play in fixing this, or is the NCAA just outdated and needs to go away?
Here's a better discussion, Jason. Is the NCAA responsible for this scenario? I would say yes, 1,000 times over. They are the ones that have created the inconsistency in governance. They are the ones that have created a vacuum in a large sense in the NIL space, and then allowed it to run wild. We don't even force agents that are dealing with college athletes or even pre-college athletes to register with the organization. Like, you've got it in the NFL. If you're going to represent an NFL player, you have to register with the NFLPA. You have to be a vetted agent. Those agents are vetted and they are held to standards. It is wild, wild west time in college athletics. And guess why? Because the NCAA abdicated their responsibility completely 10 years ago and allowed this to go down the litigious side of things. And they lost litigation after litigation. And then they found themselves being like, well, it's out of our hands. The reason we are in this predicament is the ineptitude of this organization. It needs to die, and it needs to die quickly. I am actually excited about the fact that I believe we're in the middle of a long string of dominoes that will eventually fall over to the demise of the NCAA. As the Big Ten and the SEC garner more revenue and more power within college football, they will have the ability to start to create a treaty, for lack of a better term, and create rules that then they will agree to abide by. They can govern themselves in many ways, and they do not need the NCAA. The NCAA is an archaic, inept organization that has created the vacuum that we now live in, and the faster we get away from it, the better.
Do you trust what will come after the NCAA to be better than what the NCAA's wrought?
Well, to be better than the NCAA is a really low bar. It's a really low bar. So, yes, I would say yes, I do trust in that. If you were asking me, the entity that really should govern college football, and this is the other part that I probably haven't mentioned. See, the NCAA looks out for all levels, all sports. That's a broken model. College football is way too big in order to be governed the same way that gymnastics and softball are governed. It's totally apples and oranges. So when I'm talking about this, Jason, I'm talking about college football specifically, okay? And I believe that the entity that should govern college football has to have two things. It has to have leverage in terms of the power of the purse and the power of legacy. It's the only way that you can get people to basically behave or adhere to the standards that you want them to adhere to. And the only entity that has that currently is the college football playoff. That entity moving forward, I believe, should be the governing body of college football. They will garner lots of revenue and be sharing that revenue across college football. And they will also have the power of legacy, in particular with the expanded 12-team college football playoff.
I think I agree with you, but I'm going to think on that. But the television networks are also going to have to, and maybe they are through their relationship with the college football playoff, but the TV networks have to be involved as well, because all of this is just content for the TV networks. They're footing the bill. They're going to have to be somewhat in charge in a more official and be able to be held accountable way of what happens with college football, no?
Maybe. I think that the NFL needs to step in. They wash their hands of a lot of these problems, and they are the reason, some of these problems exist. Let's be honest. The reason that a college football player can't go to the NFL draft before, some arbitrary date is the NFL. It's not the NCAA. It's not college football. So I do think that the NFL at some point, the NFLPA, need to take some responsibility for what is their feeder system and kind of come to the table. And in that sense, and I know people bristle at a comparison or to the NFL, but I will just say, the networks don't dictate to the NFL what the NFL's rules are. So nor in college football do I feel like the networks should dictate what college football is or how it should be run. It does currently, and that's partly because the sport is so fragmented and we operate in silos. The SEC does what's best for them, the Big Ten does what's best for them, the Big 12, and so on and so forth. And so because of that, the networks then can get involved, and then they can build up one silo over the other. We don't see that in the NFL. If that was the case in the NFL, all the networks would just build up the NFC East, and the AFC South would get no money. They would be the Pac-12 and be decimated through conference realignment, if you will. But that doesn't happen in the NFL because the networks don't dictate, the organization does.
Joel, thank you so much for the time. Football's just around the corner.
I know.
Go Ball State Cardinals.
That's right.
Very quickly, and this is 10 seconds. Who's going to win? Who's your pick to win the national championship?
It's hard not to pick Georgia. I know it's tough to three-peat, but man, that roster is so good. And then the other team is whoever wins the Ohio State-Michigan game. But those are the two teams that I think will play for the national championship. Georgia against the winner of that game.
Thank you, Joel. Great job as always. Smartest man talking college football. Great to have him on the show. TJ, any Thoughts about that conversation?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt the flow of what you guys were talking about. I thought it was great. The one thing I would add and expand on a little bit that I think makes your point from somebody inside the college football hemisphere right now is Lane Kiffin went on SEC Network last week and echoed everything you guys just said about coaches. He was on with, Marty and McGee, and he said the NIL stuff, the transfer portal stuff, I'm paraphrasing here, but he just said you have to accept that you're not going to have a phenomenal culture inside the locker room. And he went on to say, none of these kids that I'm coaching, or not very many, were ever dying to be at Ole Miss. And it's killing us. They may not be here tomorrow, and the kids that I have don't care what jersey they're wearing. They care what money they were offered. And so now this isn't him. This is just me talking. And so I think what that does is it's two things. They're both terribly negative. One, there's a lot of coaches who got in particularly college football because either they didn't make the NFL or they just loved the game and didn't like the business model of the NFL. So they went into coach college where it was still about culture and building young men. I think we're going to chase those coaches out. So the best coaches who actually care about doing what we're saying young men need at that will all be gone. The second thing is guys like you and I know that the culture in a high school football locker room can never reach what it can in a college football locker room because you still got to go home to your parents. You still sit in school all day. There's not the same camaraderie. And like Johnny Manziel just said in his documentary, hey, I got to the NFL and I'm like, there's no culture here. It wasn't the same. And you hear this from everybody. So there's one time in a football player's life where he's experiencing freedom for the first time, where he has to make his own decisions. And that's why you still talk to your 4 college roommates today, 30 years later. And so do I. And that's because we built that with an unbelievable culture inside of college. And now we're ruining that too. So we're actually not only putting them in a position to be chasing their brand and money and everything else, we're destroying the best thing about college football.
Good conversation with Joel. We'll talk a little bit about the debate and Vivek Ramaswamy's performance in the debate with Kathy Barnett, who is helping him execute his presidential campaign. Next.
It's my obligation, no hate, discrimination, raising up your hands for freedom.
But we are going to take a brief moment and talk about the elephant not in the room.
Former President Trump has been indicted in 4 different states on 91 counts. He will be processed tomorrow in Georgia at the Fulton County Jail for charges relating to the 2020 election loss.
You all signed a pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee. If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
All right, welcome back to the show. I did want to squeeze in some debate talk from last night. I have to admit, I wasn't overwhelmed. No one captured my imagination. The biggest moment to me is the one we just showed you where they ask about President Trump and if he's the nominee, and Ron DeSantis has to look around. What's Vivek gonna say? What's Chris Christie gonna say? What's Nikki Haley gonna do before throwing his hands up? And so I think Ron DeSantis is toast. Oh. I think there was one interesting person at the debate, and it remains Vivek Ramaswamy. The guy is fascinating. I told you all yesterday in a column, and you know, anybody that watches the show knows I'm supporting Trump, but I kind of like Vivek. And I love all these outside candidates that aren't connected to politics. I like RFK Jr. I'm just tired of these traditional politicians, and that's what I saw a lot of last night. I thought Tim Scott looked pre-recorded. I thought Ron DeSantis, someone was off camera saying, "Smile, Ron, smile, smile," and he would smile. And someone cracked a joke over Twitter that Chris Christie in that scene, he raised his hand, but he was actually trying to call over a waiter because there was a problem with his steak. There I go. What a hypocrite I am. But anyway, we're joined now by the National Grassroots Director, friend of the show, Kathy Barnett, the woman who should have John Fetterman's seat in Congress. She is now working with Team Vivek. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Vivek is very fascinating and interesting. Not sure if, the Republican Party or America is ready to make him president, but I do think he's been the big winner so far in this election cycle. I think we're going to be hearing about and hearing from Vivek Ramaswamy for the rest of our lives. He's going to be a player in politics. How do you think last night's debate went?
I thought it went extremely well. I love opportunities where Vivek gets to stand side by side with the other candidates because it allows the American people, and this is just us, on the ground in Iowa, New Hampshire, some of the earlier states. And generally it's one particular candidate goes and followed by a succession of other candidates. And I love that environment because it allows those who are sitting in the room to see the stark contrast. Last night, they were all up on the stage for the very first time all together. And I thought it just showed a stark contrast between those who are living and speaking the language of those of us who are living in the 21st century, where it is not morning America. It's some dark times that we're living in, and versus those who are literally speaking as if they're from 1982, as if they have no understanding that the Republicans today, we're not the same people that they were talking to in 2015, 2016 during Donald Trump's candidacy. A lot has happened between 2015 and today, and the psychological warfare has been real on the people in this country. Not just the psychological warfare, but inflation like we've never seen in my lifetime is upon us, and there's no solution. There's no stopping it. We're sleepwalking into World War III. We have a wide open border, fentanyl coming in. China, literally, you can't make this up. The main three components that make up fentanyl, it comes from Wuhan, China. Wuhan, China now has manufacturing facilities in Mexico. They bring the key ingredients from Wuhan and they produce it there in Mexico, give it to the drug cartel, who now skip it right into our country, and it is ravishing our nation. We're now dealing with parents having to go and work with legislators to write laws that say our children belong to us in the form of parental rights bill. We're now trying to beat down and get involved in school board, and they're labeling us domestic terrorists. So the only person who was speaking the language of those of us who are living in the 21st century on that stage was Vivek. And I believe, and now, before it was just those in some of the states, the early states that had an opportunity to be introduced to him. Last night, he was introduced to 20 plus million Americans. And so I think we have nothing but upside.
And I normally hate saying this because I think most of the time when I hear it, it's bogus, it's BS, it's just something people say, talking heads say, and there's no reality attached to it. But Vivek clearly has something about him and his personality that is attractive, and people like to bounce off his energy. Here Ron DeSantis comes in as the alleged star of that debate, the guy polling the highest, the guy with the most experience and the track record. But all the energy in that debate seemed to be centered around Vivek and people wanting to engage with Vivek and take him down. He has an it factor that no one else on that stage has, and maybe only Donald Trump has in the political space right now.
It is something so refreshing. Again, I love seeing him on the stage, center stage with perennial candidates, right? They've been running for office all their adult lives. And here you have this outsider who no one knew just 5 months ago. It was just Vivek and I was the very first person he brought onto his team. And it was just Vivek and I walking into New Hampshire and literally sitting across the table in a restaurant with one person. Then we go to two people. And now look at where he is just 5 months later, having leapfrogged these perennial candidates. And again, it's exactly what you said. There's that it factor. It's authentic. It's real. It's a breath of fresh air. Every single one of them, since you didn't watch it, I don't know if you saw one of the highlight clips. I think you did say you watched it. I'm sorry. But one of the moments is when they said, who would stop sending our money over to Ukraine? But Vivek was the only one who raised their hands. He's the only one. These people are so caught up in the way things have always been. They have no idea why songs like Rich Man North of Richmond is just going viral right now, because he's speaking a very real message. Is raw, is grimy, is ugly, but this is where we find ourselves today. There's a tremendous amount of tension that is on the streets, at the street level, at the grassroots level, which is where I spend the majority of my time. And I can feel this energy. And our prayer, Vivek talks about it often, is that that this energy will shift into a 1776 revolution versus what many are calling a national divorce. We don't want a national divorce, but that energy is real. And unfortunately, I do believe the establishment, which is what you saw on that stage, it was Vivek versus the GOP establishment. They are clueless. They are arrogant. They have no intentions of opening their eyes and saying, what is going on here? What are the American people why are they gravitating towards these outsiders? Why are they not interested in the GOP establishment and our message? They're not going to figure that out. And so again, I think we're going to have what we saw with Donald Trump, this outsider, people gravitating towards him. Because listen, I voted for Donald Trump both times, to 2016 and 2020. The first chapter in my book that went #1 on Amazon, I dedicated it to the policies of Donald Trump, comparing what he said he would do as a candidate versus what he did as president. And so I was stomping for him 10 toes down, as my kids would say. And yet now, it's time to turn the page in my book. We don't need a lame duck president. We don't need a president who is spending the overwhelming majority of his time fighting off indictments. We need someone whose sole obsession would be pulling our nation off the precipice. This is not about revenge for me. This is about my country, my children, because we have lost so much, and only God knows if we're going to get it back.
One of the smartest things Vivek has done, in my opinion, he's made the argument that you just made here, but he hasn't really attacked Trump or MAGA. There's a synergy I think you guys are trying to draft off of the MAGA movement and say, hey, here's a fresher way of going about it. I think that's very smart. And you said you were with Vivek at the very beginning of this. Is that something you guys talked about as Absolutely. A strategy? Is like, look, please explain.
It's not a strategy. It's the reality. We both appreciate Donald Trump. Like I said, first chapter of my book, I'm dedicating it to what he did, what he said he would do versus what he did. So we appreciate him, and neither of us suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. So there's no need within us that every time his name is mentioned that we lose our mind. We appreciate what he did. I cannot stand what they are doing to him now, because I recognize it's not about Donald Trump. What they're doing to him has nothing to do with the man in and of itself. These people are destroying our country. They are moving through our Constitution like a whale moves through a net. And here's the news flash, people. Our country does not exist apart from the U.S. Constitution. You remove the U.S. Constitution, we are no different from any other country. And so we recognize that. So it's not so much a strategy as the fact of, one, we don't suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. So when you mention his name, we don't lose our mind. Number two, there is an authentic appreciation for what he did during his time in office, what he could get done. Imagine what he could have gotten done if there wasn't so much headwind while he was in office. And number three, MAGA does not belong to Donald Trump. MAGA belongs to you and I. And so those are my values, right? I did not shift in 2015 to align myself with Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump who shifted and aligned himself with our values. And so those values are my values. They're Vivek's values. And so we're just picking up the ball where Trump left off, and we're intending to run it all the way into the end zone. That is what it is about me. It's not even about Vivek. It's about the fact that his policies I align with. And that is how we need to get away from personalities. We need to get away from the who you voted for, and begin to focus on the what and the why. What are these people talking about? Do they really believe it? And that is what we need to get behind. We need conviction, because conviction brings courage. And the person who takes that office is going to have a whole lot of courage, and not, unfortunately for Donald Trump, I don't think it's necessarily his fault, but his very presence just make about 30% of the nation lose their mind. And so, they just immediately go into a territory of mental illness. So we need someone who has the ability to bring our country together. We can't do it alone as Republican versus Democrat, because the dirty little secret is this isn't about Democrats versus Republicans. It's not about gay versus straight, black versus white. It is an elite group of people, the establishment. You saw some of their figureheads on that stage last night, who think they know more than the rest of us, that they know better than the rest of us. And so the rest of us just need to sit down, shut up, and get in line. That's the dirty little secret. And so we need someone who's going to have the courage, who don't have all the baggage, who won't be a lame duck, but who can actually be in office for 8 years, get our country back in line so that we can hand it off to the next generation.
So I've heard people level a criticism or a suspicion of Vivek that sounds a little bit similar to what you faced when you were running for the Senate in Pennsylvania. It's like, hey, who is she? What's her background? Hey, wasn't she really a Democrat, or didn't she think this way or that way? Are you hearing that same theme as it relates? There's a suspicion of Vivek used to think one way and this is all a gimmick. What can you say to those people that think he's adopted these positions out of political opportunism?
No. And you heard a little bit of that on the stage last night with Chris Christie saying that Vivek reminds him of Obama. And that took me back to when I was running those last 5 days. There were a lot of people in MAGA world who was saying, hey, Kathy is a Black Lives Matter sympathizer. In fact, there were certain shows that would show a picture of my brown face and then flash Obama's face on the screen every now and again, right? That because we're Black, or because Vivek is brown, because he's not white, and because I'm not white, that somehow, you don't know who they are, and can we really trust them? And I think it's very interesting that they, align us with, look at Kathy, she may be with Black Lives Matter. Look at Kathy, she likes Obama. And then you saw again Chris Christie leveling the same insinuation with Vivek, that somehow he's in line. Of all the people he could say, he wants to align him with Obama. And so I think we need to be very mindful of that. And again, I think it has more to do with the elites in the Republican Party than the people on the ground. Certainly the people I am interacting with. When I was in Pennsylvania, I spent 15 months traveling 1,500 miles every single week. going door to door almost, and met a lot of people who don't look like I look, and they loved me and they appreciated me and they came out and they remained strong in voting for me. That's the same kind of environment we're walking into when we walk into states like Iowa. They love Vivek. They appreciate him. But I think it's very interesting that those who sit high look low. They're constantly trying to throw up images of, because we're outsiders, because we don't look like the typical Republicans, somehow we can't trust them.
Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time. Again, I'm fascinated by Vivek. I think he's great. I love his energy. I love that he's an outsider. It's hard for any of these guys to out-talk him. He's quick on his feet. I thought he had a great comeback last night. Hey, come over and give me the same hug you gave Obama and help me get elected, same way you did Obama. The guy's quick on his feet. Love him, love you. Thank you so much. We'll have you back on again. But we've had a long show. We got to go. We're going to play some tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Striking like a ladder, making all these moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on a corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, all deceiving. We all wanna be free. We want freedom. I wanna be